long before the rise of great empires, before the pyramids touched the skies of Egypt, and before the first stones were laid in Rome, there was said to be a land of wonder and wisdom lost beneath the waves. Its name was Atlantis. Tonight, let your mind drift back, far beyond memory, deep into the folds of forgotten history. Imagine a world untouched by chaos, where oceans were wide and mysterious, and where legends whispered on every tide. No maps mark its place, no ruins stand in its name. And yet, we remember. The tale comes to us from the distant voice of Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, who wrote of an island so magnificent, so radiant, that it rivaled even the greatest civilizations of his time. He did not speak of it as myth or fantasy, but as history, a story passed down from priest to sage, father to son. He spoke of a mighty empire, blessed with abundance and knowledge, a place where temples shimmered in the sunlight, where the fields were rich, the waters clear, and the hearts of its people noble, at least for a time. But where did it go? Why did this great world disappear? And why does its name still echo softly but persistently through the ages? Close your eyes and listen to the silence between each word. That is where Atlantis lives now. Not in stone or sand, but in wonder. In the spaces between what we know and what we dream. And so the mystery begins. Let us travel now, not to a sunken kingdom, but to the heart of ancient Athens. The city is quiet under the soft glow of dusk. Olive trees sway gently in the breeze, and the white stone columns of the academy stand tall against a golden sky. Inside, an elderly philosopher, wise and calm, prepares to speak. His name is Plato, and tonight he will tell a story unlike any other. The scene is simple. A stone courtyard, cool under bare feet. Oil lamps flicker. Scrolls lie unrolled on marble tables. Plato gathers with his pupils, young minds hungry for wisdom. Among them are names that will echo through the ages. Critias, Timaeus, Socrates. And in the hush that follows a long discussion on politics and justice, Plato begins. Let me now tell you a tale, handed down from Solon, the great lawgiver of Athens. Solon, he says, had once journeyed to Sais, an ancient Egyptian city, where the high priests of the temple of Neith spoke to him of a land, older than Athens, older than memory. They told him of Atlantis. According to the priests, Atlantis had existed 9,000 years before Solon's time. It was vast, larger than Libya and Asia combined, and lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Solon listened in awe as they described a kingdom of wealth and beauty. Its people, children of the god Poseidon and a mortal woman, had built cities of wonder, gleaming walls, golden temples, canals that glistened under the sun. They had harnessed the land and the sea. They had tamed wild horses and constructed harbors teeming with ships. Their laws were just, their knowledge vast. But, the priests whispered, they grew greedy. They lost sight of virtue, and in time, the gods grew displeased. And so, the priest had said softly, in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared beneath the waves. Let us pause here and imagine the temple of Neith in Sais, where Solon first heard this tale. The walls are painted with faded glyphs, the scent of aged papyrus thick in the air. Torches cast flickering shadows on columns carved with lotus blossoms and crocodiles. And in the hush of that sacred place, history and legend entwine. Can you see Solon, his brow furrowed, trying to grasp the vastness of such a story? A land so ancient, so powerful, gone in a breath. Did he believe it? Or did he simply feel its truth in his bones? Plato did not treat the tale as fantasy. He inserted it into two of his most serious dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. It was not merely entertainment. It was a lesson. Atlantis, to Plato, was a mirror, reflecting what happens when a society loses its balance, when power eclipses wisdom, when ambition devours harmony. He never finished Critias. The scroll breaks off abruptly, mid-sentence, as if the tale too had been swallowed by the sea. Was that intentional, or was it fate? In the centuries that followed, philosophers debated. Was Atlantis real? A memory distorted by time? Or simply a parable carved by Plato's sharp mind? Roman thinkers like Pliny the Elder dismissed it. Christian scholars ignored it. And for nearly 1,000 years, the story slumbered, until the Renaissance breathed life into it once more. But we are not there yet. So close your eyes for a moment and return to that courtyard in ancient Athens. The lamps still burn low. The students lean in. Plato's voice is soft, but steady, as he tells of a lost world that may or may not have been, but that always will be, in the hearts of those who wonder. Atlantis begins here, not beneath the ocean, but within a story, passed from teacher to student, like a torch in the night. And now the flame is yours. The morning mist rolled off the inland hills and drifted across the great harbor of Atlantis, where the sea met stone in perfect symmetry. It was said that even the waves respected this land, that the winds softened their voices when blowing through its groves. The year? No one can say. The calendar had not yet been born, but on this particular day, as sunlight spilled over concentric canals and temple spires bathed in golden light, Atlantis stood at its peak, the heart of a world imagined not just with power, but with purpose. The city's design was a divine geometry, concentric rings of land and water, each connected by carefully crafted bridges. From above, Atlantis looked like a sacred symbol, or a living mandala. The outermost ring pulsed with life. Farmland stretching toward the horizon, where fields of barley and orchards of fig trees swayed in rhythm with the breeze. Irrigation flowed not by chance, but by engineering. Canals, paved with red sandstone and inlaid with copper plates, shimmered in the morning sun like moving mirrors. In one of these fields, an old farmer with a weathered tunic tied at the waist leaned against his hoe and gazed toward the city's center. "Even the gods must envy what we've built," he muttered softly. His granddaughter, a girl of no more than 10, ran through the lavender rows barefoot, chasing a bee. "They don't envy it," she called back. "They gave it to us." Past the farmlands, in the second ring, rose the homes of artisans, astronomers, poets, and priests. Each house was built from polished white limestone, carved with shell motifs and sun patterns. Doors were arched, windows wide, and courtyards open to the stars. Libraries stood at every district corner, not quiet places of solitude, but lively forums where children and elders alike debated celestial movement or the flow of tides. In one marble amphitheater, a group of students gathered around an old astronomer. He traced patterns in the air with a bronze rod, pointing to constellations that would not appear until night. "Every star," he said gently, "remembers us, just as we remember the sea." And the students listened, not because they feared him, but because they respected wisdom above all. At the very heart of Atlantis stood the palace of Poseidon's descendants, a sprawling complex of domes, towers, and courtyards, woven together with glistening blue stone and rare orichalcum that sparkled like fire in sunlight. Temples flanked the palace, one for Poseidon, with a statue so large that it brushed the ceiling beams of the sanctum, another for Cleito, the mortal woman the god had loved. Priests offered lotus oil, garlands of olive leaves, and the soft hum of chant each morning. The throne room, bathed in morning light filtered through pearl-stained glass, held a high chair carved from a single block of ivory and gold. King Atlas, first son of Poseidon, once sat here, though many years had passed since his time. Now 10 kings ruled, each presiding over a part of the island, each bound by sacred oath. Every 5th year, they gathered under the Temple of Fire, a subterranean chamber deep beneath the palace, lit only by burning braziers and the glow of molten stone. Each king brought a golden tablet, engraved with his laws, and placed it in a circle of stone lions. There they renewed their bond. No war, no greed, only balance. Their words echoed in that chamber like music. Let no crown weigh heavier than the law. Let no land be held by force. Let Atlantis thrive, not by conquest, but by harmony. Let us pause here, in the garden behind the palace, where turtles sun themselves on stone ledges and the scent of citrus blossoms hangs in the air. A royal scribe sits beneath a fig tree, writing with a quill dipped in indigo ink. Nearby, two children play with a carved wooden dolphin. They speak 3 languages fluently and know how to calculate the solstice. At sunset, the high priestess will bathe in the sea temple and whisper the tide's secrets into amphora. Musicians will gather in the plaza to play flutes carved from driftwood and bone. No one is in a hurry. The people of Atlantis understood time not as an enemy, but as a companion. They wore robes of linen dyed with seafoam green and coral pink. Bracelets of bronze and beads of deep blue glass clinked softly on their wrists. Their voices were calm, their speech poetic. They used metaphor more than command. Children were not struck, but sung to. Soldiers were rare, and when they trained first in philosophy. The Atlanteans believed that strength meant nothing without wisdom, and that beauty without kindness was hollow. And yet not all was perfect. Whispers moved beneath the marble floors of the palace. Some merchants grew greedy. Some kings favored luxury over law. The inner temples began to close their doors to the poor. Orichalcum, once sacred, was being mined not for worship, but for wealth. The gods, it was said, turned their gaze away. Let us return gently to the harbor, where seabirds glide silently over still water. Imagine standing at the edge of the central bridge, watching boats drift through channels lined with flowering vines. The air smells of honey and salt. The people still laugh. The bells still ring. But change is coming, subtle as a tide, but certain as nightfall. Atlantis is beautiful. Atlantis is wise. But Atlantis is not eternal. For now, let us rest in the memory of what once was, or what might have been. A utopia not lost, but sleeping just beneath the waves. The sea is calm tonight. Let your thoughts become waves, smooth, rolling gently toward an ancient horizon. Drift beyond the reach of modern coastlines, where the stars once guided mariners through silent waters, and where a forgotten continent once rose, mighty and majestic. This is not just myth. It is memory told in whispers. The geography of Atlantis was not chaos. It was symmetry, not fantasy, but function. And tonight, we walk its lands again, as they were, before they were lost. Plato wrote that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, known today as the Strait of Gibraltar, that narrow passage where the Mediterranean meets the vast Atlantic. To the Greeks, it was a threshold between the known and the unknowable. Beyond it, the world blurred into mystery. And in that place of wonder, not far from modern Spain or Morocco, Atlantis was said to have thrived, not as an island in the modern sense, but as a continent, large enough to dwarf Libya and Asia combined, so vast that it held mountains, forests, rivers, plains, and cities of incomparable size and grace. In the northern regions of Atlantis, mountains rose like jagged teeth, ancient, snow-capped, wrapped in mists of pine and sacred fog. From these highlands flowed rivers of silver and crystal water that irrigated valleys below. The southern plains were open and sun-drenched, vast enough to graze 1,000 herds of oxen and sacred bulls. Here, the earth was rich with orichalcum, a reddish gold metal more prized than anything save virtue itself. Villages clustered near mineral springs. Temples faced east, toward the morning sun. The architecture was harmonious, domed roofs, sweeping arches, and bridges carved with waves and sun symbols. It was said that even the layout of each town was based on the position of stars and the turning of seasons. At the very heart of the empire stood the capital city, a marvel constructed on flat land at the foot of a tall hill. The geography of the city was its symbol. A central island, about 5 stades across, rose from the sea, and around it, 3 concentric rings of water and 2 of land encircled it, each perfectly proportioned. These rings were not natural. They were carved by the gods and refined by men, linked by bridges of shining stone, guarded by towers, watched by priests. The outermost ring housed the docks, shipyards, and marketplaces. bustling with goods and voices from every corner of the known world. The middle ring was quieter, filled with academies, gardens, and healing houses where physicians studied the pulse of both man and earth. And in the inner ring, the royal island, rose the temple to Poseidon, surrounded by wild horses and sacred groves, and crowned by the palace of the kings. Let us pause now at the edge of the inner canal as evening descends upon Atlantis. You sit on a marble bench beneath a cypress tree. The canal's water is calm, reflecting the warm lights of the city. A gondola drifts by, carrying scholars in midnight blue robes. You hear them reciting verses about ocean tides and lunar eclipses. The air smells of rosewater and citrus. Somewhere, a soft flute plays. It is peaceful here. Not because there is no power, but because power is balanced by reverence. The very geography of Atlantis was a blueprint for harmony. Rings within rings, water within land, land within sea, society within nature. Beyond the capital, the empire stretched far. There were mountains named for spirits, caves where prophecies were whispered by wind, and inland seas lit with floating lanterns during sacred festivals. Stone highways ran arrow straight across the land, flanked by cedar trees and resting stations every 10 miles. Messengers on horseback rode from capital to coast in a day. Engineers built massive aqueducts that sang when the wind passed through them. Not by magic, but by design. The ports of Atlantis welcomed ships from all over the world. From Egypt, bearing papyrus and perfume. From Phoenicia, bringing purple dye and glass. From far Britannia, offering tin and furs. Atlantis was the hub, a bridge between worlds. A place where knowledge flowed like rivers. And yet, some say that even in its geography, Atlantis revealed its fate. A city built in rings can just as easily become a trap. The canals that once brought life could flood. The sea, once tamed by Poseidon's blessing, could rise again in judgment. And what had been a paradise of symmetry might become a grave of silence. Perhaps it was always part of the story, that such beauty could not last forever. That nature, though honored, cannot be controlled. So let us return one last time to the Temple of Poseidon, set atop the sacred hill. From its highest tower, a priest watches the horizon. He sees nothing but calm seas and distant stars. He believes Atlantis will last forever. But beneath his feet, deep in the bones of the island, something stirs, and far away the tides begin to change. For now, though, we sleep in a land of balance, a geography shaped by gods, perfected by wisdom, and soon to be tested by time. Night falls again over the quiet waters of Atlantis. The canals gleam under moonlight, and the sound of fountains fills the courtyards with music softer than dreams. As the stars bloom across the velvet sky, the people of Atlantis turn their eyes upward, not in fear, but in reverence. For theirs was not just a city of stone and water. It was a city shaped by the divine, and at the center of that divinity stood one name above all: Poseidon, god of the sea, keeper of storms, father of Atlantis. Long before the temples, before the laws, before the kings, there was only the sea. And in that vast, untamed deep, Poseidon found a land untouched by time, a land wild and sacred. There, on a hill at the center of the island, he saw her. Her name was Plato. She was no queen, not then. Just a mortal woman with eyes like stormlight and hair that caught the wind like flame. She lived alone, in a modest home built of reeds and shell, surrounded by the sounds of birds and rushing streams. The god of oceans watched her, and he felt something ancient stir in his heart. Let us pause here and imagine it. A still night, the stars high above, and Poseidon rising from the sea in silence. He does not bring thunder. He does not summon waves. He walks the shore as a man. Plato, tending her fire, sees him approach, her eyes wary but curious. "What are you?" she asks softly. And he smiles. "Something that once was wild," he replies, "and still longs for peace." What passed between them that night cannot be written. But the world changed. Poseidon, to protect her from both mortals and immortals, shaped the land around her. He struck the earth with his trident and created concentric rings of sea and land, 5 rings in total, encircling the hill on which she lived. And in the center of that circle, he built a palace. It shimmered with coral walls, with towers of gold-veined stone, and ceilings painted with the constellations of his realm. There he made Cleito his queen. Cleito bore Poseidon 5 pairs of twin sons, 10 princes in total. They were strong and noble, each blessed with gifts from the sea god: wisdom, strength, sight, grace. And the eldest, Atlas, was given the greatest share: the central island, the palace, and the title of High King. The island would come to bear his name, Atlantis. Each of the 10 sons ruled a portion of the land, and from Poseidon's hand came the laws that governed them. The 10 kings met not to wage war, but to share knowledge, to honor their father's gift. And through them, Atlantis flourished. Throughout the empire, temples to Poseidon dotted the landscape, their spires reaching toward the sky, their inner sanctuaries lit with eternal flames. The greatest of them all stood at the heart of the capital. It was over 6 stades in length, longer than a dozen warships laid end to end. Inside, the walls were plated in orichalcum, so polished they glowed like sunlight. Columns carved with dolphins and sea serpents lined the halls, and the scent of salt, cedar wood, and crushed mint lingered in the air. At the far end stood Poseidon's statue, towering, radiant, riding a chariot drawn by 6 winged horses. His gaze was stern, but not cruel. His arms stretched outward, as if to bless the people who walked below. Priests and priestesses bathed each morning in sacred pools. They sang in unison beneath skylights, their voices echoing like waves in a vast cave. Sacrifices were not of blood, but of promise. Woven garlands, crafted symbols, poetry carved into stone and offered to the altar. Let us pause now, just inside that temple. You stand barefoot on cool marble. Light filters down through golden panels, casting soft reflections across the floor. You can hear the ocean, not outside, but from within the walls, as if the building itself breathed the rhythm of tides. A priest walks past you slowly, holding a bowl of water drawn from the deepest spring. He nods, not in authority, but in welcome. Everything flows, he murmurs, from gods to men, from sea to land, from life into memory. You feel peace, but the gods did not stay. Poseidon, like all divine beings, watched from afar. His children ruled, but they were mortal, prone to pride, to longing, to error. The temples remained. The rituals continued. But slowly, slowly, the voices of the gods grew faint. And Atlantis, in its wealth and wisdom, began to forget where its greatness had come from. Priests warned of imbalance. Dreamers spoke of storms, but the markets grew louder and the prayers grew softer. Even gods, it seems, can be forgotten. So now, as you drift into rest, imagine Atlantis in its divine prime, a city built by love, ruled by legacy, and guided by laws older than time. The gods do not speak loudly. They speak in symbols, in silence, in the turning of tides. Atlantis was their gift, and the people were their test. Tonight, you sleep in a land that once heard the voice of a god. And though that voice is quiet now, it still echoes faintly in the waves. The morning mist lifts slowly from the harbors of Atlantis, revealing ships swaying gently at their moorings. The sea is still glass, painted with reflections of sky and sail. But today, something feels different. Today, there is movement. Ambition stirs in the courtyards. Hushed discussions ripple through the marble halls. The Atlanteans, once content in balance, now look beyond their shores. And so begins the rise of power. At first, the expansion was peaceful. The kings of Atlantis, descended from gods and trained in law, began sending envoys across the sea. Their ships, carved from cedar and reinforced with bronze hulls, glided over the ocean like seabirds. They carried gifts: gold, fruit, salt, wool dyed with seaweed ink, and glass that shimmered like frozen light. Neighboring lands welcomed these gifts. In return, they offered amber, tin, ivory, and loyalty. What had begun as diplomacy soon grew into something more: influence. On the island of Ruthenia, Fishermen once lit fires each night to guide their boats home. But when the Atlanteans arrived, they brought new tools: silver hooks, maps of the seabed, calendars etched in star time. The local elder, old and bent like a wind-worn tree, watched his people learn the new ways. "They do not conquer," he whispered. "They teach." And indeed, the Atlantean approach was gentle, at first. But with each passing year, the presence of Atlantis grew heavier. Atlantean governors were appointed. Atlantean law replaced custom. Temples to Poseidon rose beside shrines to older gods. And the fires the fishermen once lit, they were replaced by stone lighthouses, casting perfect circles of light over the sea. Let us pause now, in a foreign port recently embraced by Atlantis. Children run barefoot through the market, shouting greetings in Atlantean. The smell of cinnamon and olives fills the air. On a nearby wall, a mural depicts the 10 kings of Atlantis standing beneath a star-crowned Poseidon, one hand extended in peace, the other resting on a trident. There is beauty here, there is order, but also a change. The world is beginning to turn in a new direction. Atlantis, now vast in trade and diplomacy, turned its gaze to defense. From hidden shipyards carved into the island's cliffs, they launched a navy the likes of which had never been seen. Warships, powered by sail and oar, polished until they shone like obsidian, filled the docks. Each vessel bore a figurehead carved in the likeness of sea creatures: whales, dolphins, hippocamps, kraken. Some whispered that they moved faster than any natural wind, that Poseidon himself still pushed their sails. Commanders were chosen not only for bravery, but for wisdom. Each carried a scroll of laws and a compass blessed in temple fire. They were told, "Do not conquer, influence. Do not destroy, transform. But never forget. The sea will reclaim all that is taken without balance." With ships came outposts. With outposts came cities. Across the known world, colonies rose bearing Atlantean design: stone circles, aqueducts, tiled streets, schools. Languages blended, architectures merged. In the cold lands of the north, Atlantean engineers taught how to build sun-gathering roofs to warm the winter. In the deserts, they dug wells deeper than any local had dreamed possible, bringing forth gardens in the sand. The people admired them, the rulers feared them. Because with every statue raised to Poseidon, with every law rewritten in Atlantean ink, the world lost a little of its old self. And Atlantis gained a little more. Within the marble halls of the capital, the kings began to change. They grew accustomed to praise, to tribute, to gold offered not in gratitude, but in fear. One king, alien of the second district, once ruled from a modest villa. Now he rebuilt it as a fortress with silver gates and fountains that poured rosewater instead of spring water. His advisors warned him, "The gods gave us this land. They can take it." But he waved a jeweled hand and laughed. "We are the gods now. Let us return gently to the ocean." The sun sets over distant colonies. Smoke rises from hearths. Merchants close their stalls. Priests light lamps and offer prayers. But beneath the water, something stirs. The sea is old. It remembers when Atlantis was humble. It watches as ships grow heavier with treasure and hearts grow heavier with pride. And it waits. For now, the empire expands. The rings grow wider. But the center begins to crack. The wind over Atlantis changed. It did not howl. It did not roar. It whispered, soft and steady, like a forgotten promise unraveling in the dark. The fountains still flowed. The temples still burned incense. But something in the heart of the empire had begun to fracture. Let us begin here. Not with catastrophe, but with something far quieter. Neglect. The laws of Poseidon, once carved into stone tablets and recited with reverence, now sat untouched in dusty vaults. The 10 kings who once met in unity under sacred oaths now arrived late. Or not at all. Some sent envoys, others sent excuses, a few sent silence. One council chamber, once echoing with debate and laughter, now echoed only with footsteps, and the faint clink of goblets, filled more often with wine than wisdom. The palace scribes wrote fewer proclamations. The astronomers, once revered, now begged for funds. And the sea priests, they whispered warnings no one wished to hear. The capital gleamed, but not with purpose, with vanity. Gold leaf-covered ceilings once painted with stars. Pools were filled not with sacred water, but with imported oils. Banquets stretched for hours, days, even weeks, with foreign delicacies flown in by falcon and barge. A noblewoman in the 4th district once commissioned a single robe sewn with threads spun from crushed pearls. It took 2 years to finish and was worn only once. The people watched. Some admired, many grumbled. A carpenter named Theron said it best. They build their palaces taller, but the roofs leak all the same. Let us pause now in one of the city's quieter gardens. This garden, once sacred, now overgrown. The bench beneath the fig tree is cracked. The water basin is dry. A boy sits there alone. The youngest son of a merchant, kicked from his apprenticeship because his family could no longer bribe the guild. He holds a wax tablet in his lap. He writes, "Atlantis taught us to dream. Now it dreams of itself and forgets the world." King Atlas III, heir to the first bloodline, had once been known for walking barefoot through the streets, listening to the people. Now he wore a crown of fire opal and spoke only through veils. His counselors no longer came from wise families or seasoned scholars. They were chosen for flattery, for connections, for gold. And in their shadows, the iron whispers returned, calls for conquest, for domination, not as vision, but as distraction. "Let them see our power," said one general. "Let the world fear what we've become." A senator replied quietly, "The world already does." Outside the marble walls, the workers stirred. Farmers could no longer afford the seed quotas. Fishermen were taxed for each net. Roads cracked, wells went dry, and still the palace celebrated. A protest erupted in the lower canals. Peaceful, silent. Thousands stood, holding olive branches. The kings ignored them. The next day, the olive branches were gone. The people returned, with torches. In the temple of Poseidon, a priest knelt before the altar, alone. The orichalcum statue, once glowing with light, was dark. He whispered, "We forgot your tides. We feared nothing but losing what we never deserved." No answer came, just the distant groan of the sea shifting. Let us drift now through the capital at midnight. The lanterns are lit. The parties continue. But beneath the laughter, there is tension, tight as a drawn bowstring. A child sees cracks in the royal fountain. A librarian notices missing pages in the city's records. An old sailor smells salt on the wind, when no tide should be rising. Atlantis has not fallen yet, but something ancient, something sacred has already left. Its balance is broken, its roots are dry, and soon the waves will come. The night was unnaturally still. No wind whispered through the trees. No waves broke upon the shore. The birds, who once sang at moonrise, had fled inland. Even the dogs in the streets had fallen silent. And in that silence, something ancient began to move beneath the sea. Atlantis, still glowing with lanterns and laughter, did not yet know that its final day had come. It began as a murmur, a subtle shiver in the stone beneath their feet. In the temple of Poseidon, a basin of sacred water rippled without touch. The priests stared at it, brows furrowed, incense hanging untouched in the air. In the canals, fish darted in tight circles, disoriented. Deep below, in the veins of the earth, the crust of the ocean floor began to crack and stretch. "Did you feel that?" asked a scholar in the library, placing his hand on the marble floor. "Just a passing tremor," another replied too quickly. But the tremor returned, and this time it did not pass. Pause now, and picture the city on the eve of its end. Children sleep in domed homes built by generations of craftsmen. Lovers walk beneath lamplit archways. On a distant balcony, an old poet pens his final verse, though he does not know it. And above them all, the stars still shine, cold and watchful. Without warning, the sea pulled back. The harbors emptied like basins overturned. Ships tipped awkwardly on the seabed. Fish flopped on exposed coral. The people gathered on the docks, confused. A little boy laughed and ran after a silver fish caught in the sand. And then came the sound, a sound no living creature can forget. Low, roaring, like a mountain weeping. From beyond the horizon, a wall of black water rose, taller than any building, moving faster than an arrow. The sea had come to collect its due. The first wave struck the outer districts, tearing through farms and aqueducts like parchment. Entire villas crumbled in seconds. The streets became rivers. Bridges snapped like twigs. Statues toppled. Trees flew like arrows. And yet this was only the beginning. The earth beneath the capital groaned. A violent quake split the concentric rings, sending chunks of land sliding into the churning sea. Fire burst from deep vents, glowing red cracks in the earth's skin, and smoke choked the air. A tower near the palace leaned, then fell. A temple collapsed, its golden dome vanishing in steam. The cries of the people became a chorus of fear and prayer. Too late. Inside the palace, chaos reigned. Servants screamed. Nobles ran barefoot over fallen columns. The kings, what few remained, argued over what to do, even as the ground beneath them cracked open. One, King Arthur of the 9th District, tried to flee with armfuls of gold. He fell into the sea as the floor split beneath him. Another, Queen Alara of the 5th, refused to leave. She remained in the Temple of Stars, holding the hands of orphaned children. "If the gods are to judge us," she said, "let me be found with open arms." Her fate was never recorded. One final quake struck, the strongest yet, and with it, the central island, the heart of Atlantis, crumbled. The great temple of Poseidon cracked in half. The sea poured in, swallowing the sacred flames. Ships were ripped from their moorings. Statues disappeared beneath foam. Streets became trenches. Homes vanished. And in a matter of hours, Atlantis was no more. Nothing remained but silence and water. Let us return now, not to the storm, but to the quiet that followed. The sea is still again. The stars remain. But beneath the waves, the temples sleep. Some say the gods wept. Others say they turned away. But perhaps Atlantis was never meant to last forever. It was a mirror, and like all mirrors, it shattered when we no longer recognized what stared back. Tonight, it lies hidden, not destroyed, but waiting. Waiting beneath the sea, waiting in dreams, waiting in you, after the waves receded, after the fires dimmed, after the name Atlantis slipped beneath centuries of silence. The world moved on, and yet, it did not forget. In quiet monasteries, in scroll-filled libraries, in the whispered lessons of teachers and priests, the story lived. It passed not as a certainty, but as a question. Was it real? Let us listen now, not to the sea, but to those who searched for truth. The first voice we hear is that of Plato, writing nearly 2,400 years ago. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he speaks not in metaphor, but in memory. He describes a civilization blessed by the gods, corrupted by pride, and punished by nature. He attributes the story to Solon, the great Athenian lawmaker, who, generations before, had heard it from the priests of Sais, an ancient Egyptian city. The priests, wise with records older than the Greek alphabet, told Solon, "You Greeks are children. You remember only what is recent. But before even your cities, there was Atlantis." Plato believed them, or perhaps he wanted us to. Let us pause now in Plato's garden, a peaceful place in ancient Athens, where olive branches shade marble benches and students gather to listen. Imagine him there, an old man with a calm voice surrounded by scrolls, turning the legend over in his mind like a philosopher's stone. Was it history? A warning? A dream of perfection? Or a fear of collapse? He never said, and so the mystery deepened. The Roman world treated the tale as metaphor. Philosophers such as Strabo and Pliny the Elder noted Atlantis as a curious myth, but doubted its truth. They saw it as allegory, a mirror held up to society's flaws. Centuries passed. The Roman Empire fell. The libraries of Alexandria burned, and with them, much of what we might have known. During the Middle Ages, few dared to speak of Atlantis. It became a whisper beneath Christian doctrine, a pagan relic, too strange, too proud, too lost. But the Renaissance brought curiosity back. In the 15th and 16th centuries, as European explorers sailed beyond the horizon, some began to wonder, could Atlantis have been real? Francis Bacon, in his 1627 work New Atlantis, imagined it as a hidden land of science and virtue, a place of harmony, discovery, and peace. Others followed, cartographers, philosophers, dreamers. They placed Atlantis on maps, some in the Atlantic, others in the Caribbean, or even beneath the polar ice. They asked, Could it be in the Azores? Was it swallowed by the Mediterranean? Did it lie beneath volcanic islands like Santorini, shattered by eruption? Each answer led to another question. In the late 1800s, Ignatius Donnelly, a congressman turned writer, published Atlantis, the antediluvian world. He believed Atlantis was not only real, but the cradle of all civilization. His words reached millions. All the world's myths, he wrote, stem from one source, a lost homeland that gave rise to Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Americas. Most scholars rejected his ideas, but the public, they dreamed. Let us return now to a quiet study. Wood-paneled, candle-lit, filled with the scent of ink and parchment. A historian leans over a map. Her fingers trace the ocean's currents. She does not seek gold. She seeks meaning. Perhaps Atlantis was real, she murmurs. Perhaps it never was. She smiles softly. But even if it wasn't, we needed it to be. Was Atlantis a real place? Perhaps it was a memory of a sunken city. Like Helique, destroyed by earthquake and sea in 373 BC. Perhaps it was inspired by Minoan Crete, devastated by volcanic eruption and tsunami. Perhaps it was nothing more than an idea, a mirror held up to Athens, a warning of pride and power unbalanced by virtue. And yet, the oceans are vast, the earth is old, and some stories refuse to die. Tonight, as you lie still, the question remains, not to trouble you, not to haunt you, but to remind you that history is not only made of stone and scrolls, it is made of wonder. And whether Atlantis was real or not, it lives on, in questions, in whispers, in the space between truth and tale, long before maps were drawn, before pyramids reached toward the sky, before even the name Atlantis was spoken in Greek. The priests of ancient Egypt remembered. In the city of Sais, beside the slow, winding Nile, knowledge flowed like water. Its temples held records inscribed not on parchment, but stone, guarded by time and tradition. And it was here, beneath cool limestone columns and flickering oil lamps, that the first true memory of Atlantis was passed from Egypt to Greece, to us. Around 600 BC, the Athenian statesman and lawgiver Solon traveled to Egypt, not as a conqueror, but as a seeker of wisdom. He was welcomed in Sais by the high priests of the Temple of Neith, goddess of wisdom and war. There, in a sacred chamber filled with papyrus scrolls, golden statuettes, and maps older than language, the priests began to speak. One of them, aged, serene, with eyes like polished amber, placed a hand on Solon's shoulder. "You Greeks," he said softly, "are but children. You have no ancient knowledge, no old tradition." Solon blinked, puzzled. "But we remember great wars, the flood of Deucalion, the siege of Troy." The priest smiled. "You remember a flood. We remember many. There was once a great land beyond the Western Sea, a land that rose high, built wide, and fell in a single night." Solon listened. Atlantis was not a myth to the Egyptians. It was history, etched into their oldest walls. Let us pause now inside that Egyptian temple. The air is cool. The stone beneath your feet is worn smooth by centuries. Incense curls lazily upward. Carvings of ibis, lotus, and stars line the walls. A bronze bowl of water sits at the center of the room, reflecting the flicker of flame. Beside it, an ancient scribe slowly turns a scroll, revealing symbols only the initiated can read. This is not a place of myth. It is a place of memory. And memory does not lie easily. According to the priests, Atlantis had ruled over parts of Egypt long ago, not through war, but through presence. Its people were said to have taught early civilizations about farming, astronomy, and irrigation. Egypt remembered them not as conquerors, but as a rival civilization, equal in splendor, greater in ambition. When Atlantis fell, the priests said, the world changed. A new age began, one shaped by survivors, by stories, and by the Nile. Some modern historians note the similarities between Atlantean and Egyptian sacred geometry. Temples aligned with constellations, pyramidal structures or concentric symmetry, a shared reverence for balance between man, earth, and sky. Were these coincidences or echoes? The papyrus that never came. Legend tells of a lost scroll, one that Solon had planned to translate, carrying the full tale of Atlantis back to Athens. But Solon died before he could finish it. The scroll was never found. Plato, a descendant of Solon's family line, inherited only pieces, stories passed through generations, fragments of memory. And from those, he composed Timaeus and Critias, a tale born in Egypt, carried to Greece, and then to us. Let us return one last time to the banks of the Nile. It is night. A priest stands beneath a palm tree reading the stars. The wind rustles through papyrus reeds. Somewhere, a lion roars faintly across the desert. The priest closes his scroll and whispers to the sky. Atlantis is not gone. It waits, beneath the water and within us. Atlantis and Egypt, two ancient mirrors, each reflecting a different dream. One lost to the sea, one carved in stone, both speaking to us still, if only we choose to listen. So rest now. Let your thoughts drift down the Nile, past pyramids and memories, past myths and truths, past what was and what might have been. Atlantis is far behind us, and yet, somehow, still just ahead. The story of Atlantis has always lived between two tides: memory and myth, science and silence. But what if the tale of a great city lost to the sea is not entirely unique? Across the world, beneath shallow waves and ancient harbors, ruins sleep, submerged not by legend, but by time itself. In every century since Plato, explorers, scholars, and dreamers have asked the same question. If Atlantis was not real, then why do so many underwater cities exist? In the Bay of Cambay, off the western coast of India, sonar scans revealed strange geometric patterns in the deep, grid-like arrangements resembling city streets and foundations. Some claimed it was the remains of an advanced civilization dating back to 9,000 years ago, far older than anything found nearby. Others argued it was simply natural formations shaped by centuries of current and silt. Still, the mystery remained, and divers continued to search. Farther west, in the Mediterranean Sea, lies the ghost of Herakleion, once a thriving Egyptian port where priests honored Amun and pharaohs offered tribute before sailing to war. For centuries, it was thought to be a myth. Then, in the early 2000s, archaeologists discovered colossal statues, sunken temples, and intact coins resting beneath 20 feet of silt and seawater. The city had not vanished into imagination. It had simply sunk. Let us pause here and imagine a diver descending into these ancient waters. The surface glows above like a distant sky, while broken columns rise like forgotten fingers reaching toward the sun. There is no sound but breath and bubbles. Around them, fragments of amphorae lie still, unmoved for 2,000 years. The past is not gone. It waits quietly, just out of reach. In the Aegean, the island of Santorini holds another secret. A volcano, once peaceful, erupted with such fury around 1600 BC that it tore apart the island, triggering massive waves and darkening skies for weeks. Beneath the ash, archaeologists discovered the buried city of Akrotiri, a place of elegant homes, colorful murals, indoor plumbing, and paved roads. Its level of sophistication startled even seasoned historians. Could this be Atlantis? A thriving island world destroyed in a single moment of natural fury? For some, the parallels were too striking to ignore. Yet, for every discovered ruin, skeptics raise a hand. Not Atlantis, they say. Just coincidence, just geology, just another story swallowed by time. And perhaps they're right. Most sunken cities can be traced to earthquakes, coastal erosion, or rising seas. Natural explanations, nothing more. But does that make them less wondrous? In the Caribbean, tales abound of submerged structures off the coast of Cuba. Large, stone-like formations detected by sonar that some claim to be man-made. The scientific community remains cautious, demanding hard evidence. The sea, however, keeps her secrets well. Some scholars argue that our fascination with Atlantis and its kin reflects a deeper longing, not just to discover something lost, but to recover some truth about ourselves. Underwater ruins stir our imagination not because they prove Plato right, but because they remind us how fragile civilizations truly are. Let us drift now, gently, in thought. Imagine walking through an ancient city, not on land, but on the ocean floor. Temples covered in coral, mosaics dusted with sand, statues tilted as if listening to the tides. What once was filled with laughter is now silent, but not forgotten. And though no Atlantean inscription has ever been pulled from the sea, the presence of something ancient, something magnificent, lingers just beneath the surface. So was Atlantis the only city swallowed by the sea? No. But it may have been the first we chose to remember, or the one we never stopped dreaming of. And perhaps, in that dream, there is truth enough. For over 1,000 years, the tale of Atlantis slept quietly in the shadows of dusty scrolls and forgotten libraries. During the Middle Ages, the story was dismissed as pagan fiction, a strange fable wrapped in Platonic philosophy, of no relevance to a Christian world focused on heaven rather than the sea. But when the Renaissance dawned, and Europe's eyes turned once again to the classical past, Atlantis began to stir. A new world was opening, not just across oceans, but in the minds of scholars, artists, and explorers. And in that world, Atlantis was waiting to be found. As ancient Greek texts were rediscovered and translated, Plato's writings re-emerged into the scholarly spotlight. His dialogues, once read only in dusty monasteries, were now pored over by humanists who saw in them the seeds of reason, science, and forgotten knowledge. Among the many wonders these texts offered, the story of Atlantis, poetic, tragic, and eerily precise, began to capture imaginations. It was no longer just a warning or a myth. To some, it became a map. The invention of the printing press in the mid-15th century made Plato's dialogues widely accessible for the first time. Renaissance thinkers like Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola translated, debated, and taught Plato's ideas, spreading them across Europe. While most scholars treated Atlantis as allegory, a growing number of thinkers began to wonder, what if the story was real? What if the island had truly existed? And what if it could be found? Let us pause here and picture the study of a Renaissance philosopher. The air is thick with the scent of wax and ink. A candle flickers beside a Latin manuscript, open to a passage describing Atlantis' downfall. The scholar leans closer, fingers tracing each line, as if the answer lies hidden not in the words themselves, but in the rhythm between them. Outside, the world is changing. New ships are being built, new maps drawn, and old boundaries challenged. During the Age of Discovery, explorers from Spain, Portugal, and beyond began crossing the Atlantic. As they charted unknown lands, many carried Plato's story with them, wondering whether Atlantis lay somewhere between Europe and the New World. Some believed it might be the Azores, those mysterious islands far out in the Atlantic, remote and wild. Others speculated about the Canary Islands, Madeira, or even the Americas themselves, interpreting Plato's words not as fiction, but as misremembered geography. The Western Ocean, once feared as a place of monsters and endless water, now became a canvas for imagination. In 1627, English philosopher Francis Bacon published New Atlantis, a fictional account of a hidden island society devoted to science, wisdom, and moral order. Though not meant as a literal continuation of Plato's tale, Bacon's vision painted Atlantis not as a lost city, but as an ideal, a place where knowledge could flourish free of war and corruption. His version inspired generations of thinkers, from Enlightenment philosophers to the early architects of modern science. Around the same time, Athanasius Kircher, a Jesuit scholar, attempted one of the first serious attempts at locating Atlantis on a map. In one of his world atlases, he drew the island at the center of the Atlantic, placing it between Europe and the Americas, and labeled it boldly, Insula Atlantides. His map was based not on archaeology, but on ancient texts, intuition, and hope. And yet it sparked fascination across Europe. For many, It was the first time they had seen Atlantis not just described, but imagined in space. Let us drift now through the salons and libraries of 17th century Europe. Gentlemen in velvet coats sip wine as they debate lost civilizations. Artists sketch imagined ruins of Atlantis rising from the surf. Seafarers, returned from distant coasts, whisper of strange carvings and temples seen in foreign lands. It is a time of questions, wonder, and rediscovery. And in the heart of this intellectual bloom, Atlantis stands not as a ruin, but as a goal. It is during this Renaissance age that the myth of Atlantis stopped being just a cautionary tale and became a puzzle to solve, a mystery to uncover. No longer merely a warning from Plato, it became a spark for exploration, a mirror for human potential, and a question that echoed across oceans. What if we could find what was lost? And so, the search had begun. Not in sand or stone, but in the minds of those who dared to believe that buried beneath the tides of time might lie something extraordinary. By the dawn of the 19th and 20th centuries, the myth of Atlantis had long escaped the confines of philosophy. It no longer belonged only to scholars or sailors. It belonged to everyone. Novelists wrote of it, occultists claimed to remember it, and explorers continued to seek it. But as science advanced and archaeology emerged as a disciplined field, a new question surfaced, sharper than ever. Could Atlantis be found not in stories, but in the soil? The modern age brought tools the ancients could never have dreamed of. Compasses, sonar, carbon dating, and eventually, satellite imaging. With these came a wave of new discoveries and theories that spanned the globe. Yet with each new claim, so too came skepticism, and the age of modern myth-making began. Perhaps the most enduring idea of the 20th century came from Ignatius Donnelly, a U.S. congressman turned amateur scholar. In 1882, he published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, proposing that all advanced civilizations, from Egypt to the Maya, sprang from a single lost origin, Atlantis. He argued that Plato's tale was not fiction, but distorted memory passed down through generations. Donnelly's book sold widely, captivating the public. It was imaginative, sweeping, and deeply flawed. Yet it lit a fire. Let us pause here and imagine the excitement of a world just learning its own history. Archaeologists were unearthing the ruins of Troy, of Babylon, of the Valley of the Kings. Suddenly, myths once dismissed as fantasy were being pulled from the earth. Why not Atlantis, too? In the Atlantic Ocean, near the Bahamas, divers found a strange formation off the coast of Bimini in the 1960s. Rectangular stone slabs arranged in a line. Dubbed the Bimini Road, it sparked global fascination. Could it be the edge of an Atlantean harbor? Supporters claimed the stones were cut and placed with intention. Critics called them naturally occurring beach rock. The debate remains unsettled. Elsewhere, Santorini once again drew attention. The eruption that destroyed the island of Thera in the 2nd millennium BC left behind more than ash. It revealed the preserved city of Akrotiri, with multi-story homes, advanced plumbing, and vibrant art. Many saw echoes of Atlantis, a sophisticated island society destroyed in a sudden cataclysm. Could Plato have heard a garbled version of this real event passed down over centuries? It was plausible, but incomplete. Then came stranger theories. Some proposed that Atlantis was Antarctica, hidden beneath layers of ice, its ruins preserved in permafrost. Others pointed to Bolivia's Altiplano, or Indonesia, or even the submerged Doggerland between Britain and Europe. Each theory came with maps, arguments, and passionate believers, but little proof. Let us drift now into the realm of dreams and delusions. In the early 20th century, mystic Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, claimed in trance that Atlantis had been real and that survivors had spread knowledge to Egypt and the Americas. He predicted that parts of Atlantis would rise again in the late 20th century, an event that, of course, never came. Yet his influence lived on, shaping the beliefs of entire communities drawn more to spiritual truth than scientific evidence. Modern archaeology, by contrast, demands rigor. No trace of Atlantis, no pottery, no writing, no skeletons has ever been verified. Mainstream scholars continue to insist that Atlantis was a moral allegory, not a lost continent. And yet, even the most skeptical archaeologist cannot fully extinguish the public's fascination. Why? Because the story touches something deeper than data. Let us reflect here. Atlantis is not just about a sunken island. It is about human pride, the fragility of progress, the allure of forgotten wisdom. Every time a new ruin is discovered beneath the sea, whether in the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, or the Indian Ocean, our hearts leap with the same question. Could this be it? And even if the answer is no, the mystery persists. For many, Atlantis has become more than a place. It is a symbol of what we've lost and what we still hope to recover. Balance, harmony, understanding. And so the modern search continues, not with shovels alone, but with imagination. Far beyond the sunlit waters of the Mediterranean and the warm waves of the Atlantic lies a place where the sea itself turns to silence. A continent of wind and ice, shrouded in darkness for half the year and cloaked in white for the rest. Antarctica. Vast, inhospitable, and hidden beneath miles of snow, hardly seems the place for the ruins of a lost civilization. And yet, some believe this frozen land may hold the final resting place of Atlantis. The theory, strange at first glance, emerged in the mid-20th century, fueled by shifting ideas in geology and a growing public appetite for lost worlds. According to the Antarctica theory, Atlantis was not located in the Atlantic at all, but on the southernmost continent, before it was covered in ice. The idea rests on one astonishing premise, that Antarctica was once further north, lush and green, home to forests, rivers, and perhaps human life. Let us pause here and imagine the unimaginable. A warm Antarctica before the Great Freeze. Rolling meadows where penguins do not yet exist. Tall, dark mountains above fertile plains, ringed by freshwater lakes. In the sky, long hours of daylight stretch over a society that knows the sun not as luxury, but as rhythm. Could a civilization have thrived here, unknown to history, destroyed not by war, but by the shifting of the earth itself? In the 1950s, Charles Hapgood, a historian and professor, published the book Earth's Shifting Crust, proposing that the outer crust of the planet had once slid suddenly, displacing entire continents. According to this theory, Antarctica had once been situated in a temperate zone before a rapid crustal movement pushed it to the South Pole, burying it in ice. Hapgood claimed ancient maps supported his idea, particularly the famous Piri Reis map, a 16th century Ottoman chart that appeared, some argued, to depict Antarctica's ice-free coastline. Even Albert Einstein, curious and open-minded, wrote a foreword for Hapgood's book. He did not claim belief, but he acknowledged the boldness of the vision. Others were less kind. Most geologists today reject the idea of sudden crustal displacement, favoring the slower processes of plate tectonics. Antarctica, they say, has been frozen for millions of years, far too long for any civilization, Atlantean or otherwise, to have left a trace. And yet, there are anomalies. Satellite imagery has revealed strange geometric patterns beneath the ice in certain regions. Lines, blocks, and ridges that some interpret as unnatural. In 2001, rumors swirled that scientists had discovered structures buried beneath the surface. Caves warmed by geothermal heat, large enough to support life. These claims remain unconfirmed, surrounded by secrecy, speculation, and silence. Let us drift now through the white stillness of Antarctica. Imagine standing on a snowy ridge, beneath a sky so clear you can see the edge of the earth. The wind howls, biting at your face. Beneath your boots lie layers upon layers of time. Ice thicker than cathedrals, frozen oceans of memory. What might sleep down there, under the weight of millennia? For some, the mystery is enough. They argue that Atlantis could have existed in a warm Antarctica, that its destruction came not by flood or fire, but by cold, that its temples lie buried beneath glaciers, waiting for a world that can find and understand them. For others, the theory is fantasy, an exotic tale born not of evidence, but of yearning. Still, the idea endures. Because Atlantis, at its core, has always been more than geography. It is the dream of something great and lost, of wisdom drowned, of beauty buried beneath layers we cannot quite reach. And what better symbol for that dream than a continent none of us can truly touch? As the world entered the age of industry and reason, the story of Atlantis did not vanish. It transformed. With each passing century, as science uncovered more about the physical world, Atlantis receded deeper into the realm of the spiritual. No longer just a sunken continent, it became a symbol of lost wisdom, cosmic order, and the forgotten truths of the soul. Let us enter a quieter space now. Not a temple or a ruin, but a candlelit room lined with books and crystals, where seekers gather in silence. They do not speak of Atlantis as myth or geography. To them, it is a memory of the soul. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a movement known as Theosophy gave Atlantis new life. Led by mystics such as Helena Blavatsky, the Theosophical Society believed that history was not merely linear, but cyclical, a series of spiritual ages. According to Blavatsky, humanity had passed through several root races, each rising and falling in long cosmic cycles. Atlantis, she claimed, had been the home of the fourth race, a spiritually powerful but ultimately corrupted people who fell due to misuse of their psychic gifts. Blavatsky described the Atlanteans not only as advanced in science and architecture, but as possessing deep esoteric knowledge, telepathy, astral travel, energy manipulation. They were in tune with the natural forces of the earth and the stars. And yet, as with all great civilizations, they eventually fell to pride. Their downfall, she warned, was a mirror of our own. Later, mystics would build on her ideas. Edgar Cayce, an American psychic often called the sleeping prophet, gave dozens of trance readings about Atlantis in the 1930s and 1940s. In his visions, Atlantis had been a technologically advanced society powered by mysterious crystals and aligned with the forces of the universe. He claimed that survivors of its destruction had spread across the globe, to Egypt, the Americas, and even Tibet, seeding the wisdom that would later blossom into ancient religions and sciences. Cayce's followers believed that many souls alive today are reincarnated Atlanteans, drawn to knowledge, healing, and spiritual balance. He predicted that parts of Atlantis would rise again in the 1960s, and that its wisdom would return during a new age of awakening. Let us pause here, not on a shoreline, but in meditation. Breathe in slowly. Imagine a golden temple surrounded by turquoise seas, filled not with treasure, but with silence. The kind of silence that teaches, the kind that remembers. For those who follow esoteric paths, Atlantis is not lost. It is within, a vibration, a state of being, a call to higher consciousness. In New Age circles today, Atlantis remains a central archetype. It represents the peak of spiritual evolution, the fall into ego, and the possibility of redemption through awareness. Guided meditations, channeled messages, and energy healers often refer to Atlantean past lives or sacred symbols said to originate from that ancient realm. Skeptics see fantasy. Believers see truth encoded in myth, not in the sand or the sea, but in the human heart's longing for wholeness. And perhaps that is what Atlantis has become. A mirror for the soul. A parable not just of collapse, but of potential. A reminder that civilizations are not only built with stone and law, but with the intentions of the spirit. So, as you rest tonight, close your eyes and listen not to the waves, but to the stillness beneath them. There may be no ruins to find, no inscriptions to uncover, but Atlantis may live on in the spaces we rarely explore. In intuition, in imagination, in the quiet memory of who we might have been, and who we might become again. Atlantis, once whispered through temple halls and pondered by philosophers, now floats through books, films, and stories told by firelight. What began as a single myth in the mind of Plato has spread like ripples across the surface of culture, carried not only by seekers of truth, but by storytellers of every kind. Let us begin not with a lost continent, but with a library shelf. Imagine your fingers brushing the spines of novels, comic books, and movie scripts, each one a different vision of Atlantis. Some glowing with gold, some filled with shadows, some rising from the sea triumphant, others pulled back beneath the waves in sorrow. It was the Renaissance that first revived Atlantis in literature, but it was the modern era that transformed it into a symbol, one that could be remade again and again to suit each generation's hopes, fears, and dreams. In the 17th century, Francis Bacon's New Atlantis reimagined the lost world as a utopia of scientific discovery, a place where reason and spiritual harmony coexisted. His fictional island was home to the House of Solomon, a proto-research institute where experiments were conducted in secrecy for the good of humanity. Bacon wasn't interested in underwater cities. He saw Atlantis as an ideal society, a guide for future civilization. Centuries later, Jules Verne, the father of modern science fiction, offered his own nod to the legend in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. In it, the enigmatic Captain Nemo guides his submarine through the ruins of Atlantis deep beneath the ocean. A city still and ancient, half forgotten but strangely alive. Verne's Atlantis was a ghost of a golden age, haunting the present. Let us pause here. Imagine a silent ocean floor. Your light flickers across a statue, a face half buried in sand, a hallway tilted, still adorned with mosaics. Coral clings to the columns, and tiny fish dart through doorways where once walked kings. Atlantis in fiction is not just a place. It is a feeling of wonder, of sadness, of what might have been. In the 20th century, Atlantis became a favorite of comic books and animated adventures. In DC Comics, the underwater realm became the kingdom of Aquaman, a royal hero caught between two worlds. Atlantis here was not lost. It was hidden, majestic, and filled with mystery. In Marvel's universe, the Atlantean warrior Namor ruled beneath the sea, a prince of power and pride, defending a sunken empire. Animated films and television have reimagined the legend in dozens of forms. Perhaps most notably, Disney's Atlantis, The Lost Empire, 2001, brought viewers into a world of glowing crystals, ancient technology, and forgotten languages. Here, Atlantis was not just myth. It was science fiction wrapped in archaeology, magic, and mythology. For a new generation, it became a dream again. Even popular series like Stargate, Assassin's Creed, and Tomb Raider have explored the legend, blending it with aliens, secret histories, and puzzles buried beneath the sea. Atlantis, in each version, is whatever the story needs it to be. A cautionary tale, a treasure hunt, a stage for heroism, or a key to humanity's past. Let us drift now into a quiet theater. The lights dim. On screen, a city shimmers underwater. A voice narrates tales of kings and cataclysm. The audience, young and old, sits in silence, drawn not by proof, but by possibility. Atlantis, in pop culture, does not need to be proven. It simply needs to be imagined. Perhaps that is why the legend endures. Not in ruins, but in retelling. With every film, every novel, every whispered bedtime story, Atlantis becomes something new, something personal, something alive. And maybe that is the greatest legacy of all. Not that Atlantis was real, but that it still inspires us to ask, what if it was? For centuries, Atlantis has floated somewhere between fact and fable. Too detailed to dismiss entirely, too fantastical to prove. But what if the legend didn't begin as myth at all? What if, buried beneath layers of exaggeration and centuries of retelling, there once stood a real place, not a utopia, not a dream, but a thriving society that nature swallowed and memory reshaped? In the quiet chambers of universities, beneath the glow of research lamps and in the margins of scholarly journals, some scientists have begun to reconsider the question not with faith or fantasy, but with possibility. Let us start with Plato's own description. He tells us Atlantis was a vast island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, and that it disappeared around 9,000 years before his time, in a single day and night of cataclysm. Many have taken these details literally, but others suggest they may have been mistranslations, miscalculations, or simply metaphor. What if Plato, or the Egyptian priests he quoted, confused years with lunar cycles? If so, Atlantis might have fallen not 11,000 years ago, but perhaps 1,000 years before Plato, a time frame much closer to known historical disasters. One of the most widely accepted scientific comparisons is the eruption of Thera, modern-day Santorini. Around 1600 BC, this massive volcanic event devastated the Aegean region and likely caused tsunamis and ash clouds that reached far into the eastern Mediterranean. The island of Thera was home to the Minoans, a highly advanced civilization with writing, art, trade networks, and urban planning. Their cities were vibrant and refined, full of color, harmony, and sophistication. And then, they were gone. Let us pause and picture it. A calm morning by the sea, whitewashed buildings along the shore, pottery drying in the sun. Then the sky darkens, the earth splits, and the sea turns inward, only to come crashing back. It is a scene that echoes Plato's Atlantis in eerie detail. Could this be the true origin of the legend? Other scientists point to Helike, a Greek city on the Peloponnese that was destroyed by an earthquake and tsunami in 373 BC, just a few years before Plato wrote Timaeus. It too vanished beneath the sea, and for centuries, its story was dismissed as legend until divers discovered its remains beneath layers of silt and salt. Its rediscovery proved that entire cities could disappear and be forgotten. Further afield, researchers have studied the possibility of once thriving civilizations along coastlines now submerged due to rising sea levels. During the last ice age, sea levels were far lower, and much of what is now ocean floor was dry land, fertile, habitable, and perhaps home to societies never preserved in written history. Let us drift now into the world of sonar scans and deep sea mapping. Modern technology has revealed ancient riverbeds, submerged valleys, and hints of man-made structures along continental shelves. No definitive Atlantis has emerged, but the idea that we have barely scratched the surface of Earth's ancient memory remains. Some scientists, open to the idea but cautious in claim, suggest that Atlantis may have been a composite memory, a blending of multiple disasters, cultures, and stories passed down and woven together. A little Minoan Crete, a little Helike, perhaps even distant echoes from the Indus or Andean civilizations. What Plato recorded may not have been a lie, but a legend rooted in fragmented truth. Let us reflect here. The scientific method asks for evidence, and rightly so. Atlantis, as described by Plato, remains unverified. But the Earth holds many secrets still. What we know today may be a small part of what once was. And if we listen, not just to the data, but to the silence, we might hear not a single voice crying out from the past, but the chorus of many lost worlds, asking not to be believed blindly, but to be remembered gently. And so, even in the most rigorous corners of science, the question lingers. Not because we lack answers, but because we are still, always, searching. As the centuries pass and the questions deepen, a single truth begins to shimmer through the layers of history, myth, science, and speculation. Whether Atlantis was a real place or not, it has always meant more than just stone walls or sunken ruins. Perhaps it was a city. Perhaps it was a parable. Perhaps, like many things in human memory, it was both. Let us begin once more with Plato. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Atlantis is presented as a cautionary tale. A mighty empire blessed with wealth, knowledge, and divine favor, slowly undone by its own arrogance. The city that once lived in harmony with nature and the gods became consumed by pride, ambition, and conquest. The result was not invasion, not rebellion, but destruction from nature itself. A fall from grace, not by enemy sword, but by the turning of the earth. What Plato gave us then may not have been a history lesson, but a moral mirror. A warning about the dangers of imbalance, the fragility of human power, and the illusion of control. To see Atlantis only as a city is to miss what it truly reflects. Let us pause here in the quiet of your mind and imagine a scale. On one side, knowledge, beauty, wisdom. On the other, greed, pride, domination. Atlantis stood once in perfect balance, until it tipped. Throughout time, philosophers and dreamers have returned to Atlantis not just for answers, but for reflection. It became a metaphor for lost potential, a reminder that even the greatest societies can fall when they forget their foundation. It is a symbol that speaks not of geography, but of choice. And yet, the details in Plato's account are so precise, so vivid, that it's easy to understand why many believe he was describing more than an idea. The ringed capital, the sacred temples, the laws of the 10 kings. These are not the brushstrokes of a simple parable. They are architectural, legislative, specific. Some argue that no philosopher invents that much detail for metaphor alone. So which is it? Was Atlantis a civilization whose name survived long after its stones sank beneath the waves? Or was it an eternal symbol, rising in every era when humanity needed to be reminded of its limits? Let us drift gently into that thought. Imagine a child sitting beside an elder, hearing the story for the first time. Eyes wide, breath quiet. Not because the child expects to sail to a lost city tomorrow, but because in the story, there is truth. A truth that does not need maps. A truth that lives not in coral or ruin, but in meaning. Atlantis, then, may be both. A place that once was, and always is. A civilization that shaped its time, and a symbol that shapes ours. And perhaps that is why the legend endures. Because whether we seek it in the sea, in the soul, or in the stories we tell ourselves, we find something we recognize. A longing for harmony, a warning against excess, a dream of beauty lost, and wisdom rediscovered. For more than 2,000 years, Atlantis has drifted at the edges of human imagination. Sometimes as a destination, sometimes as a dream. Its story has been told in stone and scroll, in novels and films, in quiet conversation and wide-eyed wonder. And still, it calls to us. But why? Why do we return again and again to a city we cannot touch, whose existence we cannot prove? Let us begin with something simple. The longing to understand who we are. Atlantis, whether real or symbolic, offers a powerful reflection of the best and worst within humanity. Brilliance and beauty, hubris and downfall, curiosity and loss. We search for it not just to find it, but to find ourselves in the search. Imagine standing on the deck of a ship as dawn breaks over a silent ocean. The wind brushes your face. The sky is soft with light. Below you, endless water. Still, deep, ancient. You know there is land behind you. You know there is land ahead. But in this moment, you are between. This is where the myth lives, in the space between certainty and mystery. Atlantis is not the only legend of a lost world. Cultures across the globe tell of golden ages swallowed by time, of floods, of fallen towers, of cities forgotten beneath jungle, ice, or sea. Whether it's the biblical flood, the aboriginal dreamtime, or the submerged cities of Indian and Greek lore, these stories whisper of something once held, now gone, and always, of something still waiting to be found. Let us pause now and step into the mind of a modern seeker. A scientist scanning satellite images for unnatural angles in the seabed, or a diver descending into Caribbean blue, where coral hides what might once have been a pillar. Even when the data offers no confirmation, the question remains, what if? And it's not just about geography. The search for Atlantis is a search for a lost wholeness, a society in balance, a civilization advanced in spirit as much as in stone. We look for it because we feel something is missing. In ourselves, in the world, in our history. Atlantis becomes a metaphor for the wisdom we suspect we once possessed, and somehow, somewhere, lost. And so, we search in many ways. In deep-sea trenches, in ancient texts, in dreams, in silence. The search itself becomes meaningful. Like a lighthouse on a forgotten shore, Atlantis may never be reached. But it guides us. Let us drift, just for a moment, to a place where stories sleep. The sea is calm, the stars are bright, and down below, beneath layers of silt and centuries of silence, something ancient waits. Not necessarily a city, but a memory. A call, not to conquer, not to prove, but to wonder. Atlantis survives because we need it to, because it gives us space to imagine, to remember, to hope. It is the echo of a civilization, or the echo of who we wish to be. And in that echo, we listen. And in that listening, we search. Now we come to the end of our journey, not with answers, but with calm. The sea, which once roared with waves and fire, lies still. The winds that once carried ships toward unknown horizons now rest. And the name Atlantis, spoken for centuries in wonder and debate, slips once more into silence. But before we close our eyes to the story, let us linger for a little while longer in its soft glow. Not to measure it, not to solve it, but simply to feel what it leaves behind. Atlantis may never be found on any map. Perhaps it never existed in the way we hope. But that was never the point. The story was never meant to stay fixed in stone. It lives best in movement, in the currents of imagination, the tide of curiosity, the waves of wonder that rise and fall within us. Let us pause here, not in a palace or temple, but in your own quiet thoughts. Atlantis is the part of the human spirit that dreams of something better. It is a longing for wisdom untouched by corruption, for beauty unspoiled by time. We imagine a world where balance was once real, where harmony guided every action, and where the downfall came not from outside, but from within. A gentle reminder that what is most powerful in us must be held with care. Think of all the places you've visited in this journey. Temples plated with orichalcum, statues drowned in coral, scholars reading ancient maps, mystics speaking of soul memory, scientists scanning the ocean floor for lost geometry. Each vision, each voice, was a different shape of the same story. And now, we let it go. Let us drift gently into the deep. The city lies beneath layers of water and myth. Its streets quiet, its domes soft with moss. No one walks there now. And yet, somehow, it lives. In the questions we ask, in the symbols we draw, in the stories we pass down in the dark, hoping someone will remember. Close your eyes and imagine that descent, past light and color, past sound and breath, into a stillness so profound that even time pauses. Down there, in that hush, lies not just a city, but the imagination itself. Vast, silent, waiting. Atlantis does not ask us to believe. It asks us to dream. And so, as the waters settle and the journey ends, we do not say farewell. We simply drift and listen and rest. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time, memory, and mystery. Whether Atlantis was a city of stone or a dream of the soul, its story lives on. In curiosity, in wonder, and in the quiet hope that something beautiful, once lost, might one day return. If your eyes grow heavy now, let them close. Let the waves carry you softly into sleep, where stories drift like stars across the sea of your thoughts. Good night, and may your dreams take you somewhere deep and timeless.